The views, comments, and opinions of the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Morris Media Studios, MorrisMediaLive.com, or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
Voice is really greater in the mix of time and the chicken body flavor. A poem could be safer, but the voice is really greater in the mix of time and the chicken body flavor. The poem could be safer, but the voice is really greater in the mix of time and the chicken body flavor. A poem could be safer, but the voice is really greater in the mix of time and the chicken body flavor. Bobby sang the silent ear. Bobby sang in my silence. Bobby sang the black onyx of the tie-dye moccasins of Yoruba. Bobby sang the black jewel son of Cosby Warning. Bobby sang the mint julep of the Red Cliff, Georgia. Sang the toe-tapped aqua shoes of Brother Hines. Bobby sang the silent ear, sang the turntable line. Bobby sang the ports of Everson, sunshine, trimming rainfall. Singing the secret war pit of the twisted line. Singing the native wicked wide-eyed look of Jupiter. Bobby sang you. A poem could be safer, but the voice is really greater in the mix of time and the chicken body flavor. A poem could be safer, but the mix is really greater in the mix of time and the chicken body flavor. Poem could be safer, but the voice is really greater in the mix of time and the chicken body flavor. Poem could be safer, but the voice is really greater in the mix of time and the chicken body flavor. Poem could be safer, but the voice is really greater in the mix of time and the chicken body flavor. Poem could be safer, but the voice is really greater in the mix of time and the chicken body flavor. Poem could be safer, but the voice is really greater in the mix of time and the chicken body flavor.
By Ron Allen. Welcome to the Qumran Report. May the peace and blessings of the life-giving creative spirit be upon you and upon your family. My name is Melvin Ishmael Johnson, coming at you live from Morris Media Studio. Our call-in number is 1-323-293-3375. Now, this week on the Qumran Report, we'll have a conversation with Reginald Fagan. But first, I would like to announce two upcoming plays. One is a world premiere play. The two plays is Voice from the Village, a play about Lynn Manning, award-winning playwright, poet, and actor Lynn Manning, who visited Skid Row Studio for an interview on the Qumran Report to talk about his life growing up in Watts and turning a tragic situation into an art form. The performers is Mark V. Jones, Jonathan Wynn, Raquel Rosa, Charlotte Plummer, and Gary Robertson. That's March the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. Friday, Saturday at 8, and Sunday at 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. We have two performances on that day. It's at the Complex Hollywood, located 6476 Santa Monica Boulevard, Hollywood, California, 90038. Now, you can buy your tickets at brownpapertickets.com and put in Voice from the Village. For ticket information, you can also call 213-908-5032. This event is produced by Drama Stage Qumran Veterans Theater Workshop, where the funds will go towards a Veterans Short Play Festival coming up Veterans Day weekend, and I'll keep you informed about that. The other play is a world premiere play by GWC Productions. It's New Men, written by George Corman and directed by Bill White. It's about an African-American fraternity brothers, members of Nu Phi, who refer to themselves as New Men, have a reunion after 30 years in 1995 in the African nation of Namibia. And the performance is April the 19th, 20th, 21st, 26th, 27th, and 28th, Friday and Saturday at 8, Sunday at 3 p.m. That's at the Zephyr Theater, located at 7456 Melrose Avenue, Los Angeles, California, 90046. And we will make this announcement again at the latter part of the show. Now, I'm delighted to have with us in the studio Reginald Fagan. And let's move over to Reginald right now. Let him tell us a little about himself. Can you give us a little background and what are you off into, et cetera?
Melvin, it's great to be with you again. It's been a while since we spoke, about 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. But I'm an agriculturalist. I grew up in the Compton, South Central area, but I had two granddads that were farmers, Oklahoma and Mississippi. So I spent many a summer visiting them and spending a lot of time on the farms. I grew up in a part of the Comptons called Richland Farms. So we had horses and we had all kind of pigs, you name it. So I was, really active with the 4-H and the FFA. And I was fortunate enough to go to the University of California, Davis, study agriculture economics, and went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and picked up a viticulture certificate. So, I've been, involved in agriculture from many aspects. I did some national work in D.C. with the Department of Agriculture, U.S. Department of Interior. Did some outreach, went around to about 41 states, working with farmers, particularly black farmers, helping them to look at ways of marketing their products and different methodologies to improve the yields. I also had opportunity to do a lot of work with a lot of national NGOs and traveled around and did some work with Bob Stanton, who was the first African-American director of the national parks, Clinton administration. So it's been a pretty good journey. But the last 12 years, I came back home and doing a lot of work with local schools, K through 12. Taught over at Cal State Dominguez for about 3 years, urban agriculture, and set up a couple of clubs, Compton College, El Camino College. I taught gardening over in Nickerson Gardens, brought a lot of my students over there. That was pretty interesting. And just have been, just taking the blessings and trying to put them back and try to, connect as many people back to the land and stewardship.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, you mentioned food sovereignty. Can you define and talk a little about that, the importance of it?
Yes. Well, food sovereignty is the right of a people to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through economically sound, sustainable methods, and their rights to define their own food and agricultural systems. It was part of a movement that took place in the late 90s, early 2000s, where small peasant farmers were feeling overrun by the industrial farm system, and they went to the United Nations and the World Food Summit that was held, and first they had one in 1996, and they had another one in 2002. And that's where the term food sovereignty came from. It was an effort to say that, look, everyone should have the right to control their food.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So how about, can you talk a little, can you give a little history, or better yet, can you talk about the situation out here in terms of Los Angeles, especially in the African-American community, in terms of understanding the importance of food sovereignty?
Well, it's unfortunate that here in L.A. and just in many cities across the country, black folks have looked at agriculture as something that we used to do, something in the past. And there is a tendency where we've decided that everybody else can grow our food and that, we are comfortable with that. And that, even when you look at a lot of our restaurants, our traditionally black restaurants, I won't name any of them, but, you don't see us working in a lot of them. And so it's this feeling that, food is not that important. But like I say, food sovereignty is the basis of controlling your food. Mm-hmm. And if you don't control your food will be used against you. And so what has been happening is our food has become weaponized. And a lot of the food that's in our communities is not good for us. It's a lot of food that's moving us into situations where we're having to take a lot of medications because the food that we're getting in our community is lacking in nutrition, full of pesticides, genetically modified. And so, as far as L.A., it's a perfect climate. Some people are growing their foods. But then L.A., like many cities, is a dirty place. I mean, you got a lot of lead and a lot of heavy metals in the air. And so I find even with the Going Green urban agricultural movement, the science was left out. A lot of people were putting gardens in and they hadn't tested the soil. They weren't measuring the nutrients. It was just kind of a chase for a grant and overnight, fame. And that's not the basis of food sovereignty.
So what are some of the things you think that we can do to make a dent in that? Yeah.
Well, I think, what we need to really do is make sure, like one thing I was doing when I was working in a lot of the schools, in particular elementary schools, I would find young people, they were just so excited behind when we went in the gardens. In fact, some of them would wait and couldn't wait to get out there in the gardens. And what we have to start doing is identifying young people when they're real young and moving them through the stages of ensuring that perhaps these can become our future farmers. Yeah, urban agriculture has its place. There are a lot of opportunities where you can grow fish in warehouses, vertical gardens, and in some cases there are some parts of the city that you can do outdoor kind of gardening. But I think we need to look at encouraging our young people to embrace agriculture. And I think sometimes kids, they just don't get exposed to it. They think that everything is coming from the store. They don't understand that this is coming from a farm. So I think what we have to do is get a little bit more serious about it. There's courses like Master Gardeners out there. But, if you're really serious about it, there are schools like Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, Cal Poly Pomona, UC Riverside. There's so many schools where you can go and get a degree and you become an expert in the field.
Now, how about in terms of nutrition? Let me ask you this question. As far as nutrition is concerned, is there a major difference between a vegetarian and a vegan?
Well, I believe a vegan is someone.
Vegan?
Vegan. Yeah, because, those terms can be loosely, and that's not an area of my expertise, but from my understanding, that, they interchange the terms a lot of times. Vegans, I tend to think of, they don't eat anything with a face on it. And, that's eggs, any kind of thing. They're strictly a plant-based type diet. I've met vegetarians that, will sometimes say, well, I eat a little chicken and fish sometimes, But I think, it's the vegan is the one that really is really serious about a plant-based diet. And again, like I said, that's not area of my expertise.
Now, can you talk a little about the state of the black farmer?
Yes. Well, I have some numbers I've collected from a census report 2014, and it shows that right now we have approximately, let's say, it says 1.4% of the 3.2 million farmers are black. And it says that most of your black farmers are in Texas. 90% live in the 12 southern states. The black farmers are generating close to $846 million agricultural products, and that's including crops and livestock. Altogether, black farmers, they operate on about 3.6 million acres of farmland. But this is something that we really have to think about, is that the average farmer has about 180 acres, okay? But 75% of the sales are less than 10,000. So you got 79% of the farmers making less than 10,000. So what that says to me is that we're not connecting through our food system from the seed to the table. Somewhere in there, our black farmers aren't getting black consumers behind them. There's a breakdown. And that we got to figure out ways that we can connect and get our people either through brand development, either through opening up our own food co-ops, our own markets, to be able to connect, because it doesn't make any sense that we have, I mean, the black farmer has dwindled over the last 100 years. I mean, we've lost a lot of our black farmers. The average black farmer is 60 and 70 years old. And so we have a serious issue here. Mm-hmm. But we as consumers, and particularly with the restaurant owners, the black restaurant owners, mm-hmm. and the various, what you saying? Okay.
We got a call. But
okay. The restaurant owners that, you know, we got to figure out ways that we can be able to connect our black farmers to our black food distributors, black restaurant owners, and create more markets.
Okay. I want to get back into that black farmer, but we have a call. Who am I speaking with?
This is Jay Speeder. I told you I called back my brother.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing fine, sir.
Man, it's good to hear you again. Man, I thought about you a lot. Had a great discussion with my brothers about you. So how...
Yes.
You have a question, a comment?
Yeah, I got a question and a couple comments. Tell my brother he don't have to be an expert on the vegan. You hit it straight on the point. I mean, it ain't rocket science. You hit it straight on the point. That was the difference between the two. None of them eat any meat byproduct when you're vegan, and when you're vegetarian, you know, then you might eat chicken and eggs. Just like he said, I'm not gonna repeat what he's saying. But I'm from Georgia. And my father was a farmer. I mean, it wasn't no big farm, but it was just what we had on our land. You know what I mean? When I moved to California, I made sure I always have a balcony, and I don't need nothing but five by 5, and I can grow food right on my balcony. I have never owned a place since I've been in California since 1990. I didn't grow my food, some of my food anyway, especially my vegetables. I have collard greens all year round, man, and just even now I got some at my house. So yeah, keep pushing that out there, and you're correct when you're talking about your guest talking about they have to make the connection. I remember when the Nation of Islam was doing the farmers market, and we was buying a lot of stuff from the farm, from the black farmers. I think we got to do more stuff like that. Churches got to get hooked up to what they're having their own farmers market, buying produce and stuff from black farmers. We got to keep this thing going, man, because the man who controls your stomach controls you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great comment. Do you have another, would you like to ask my brother Fagan a question?
Oh, yeah. I want to ask him, I don't know the correct term, the hydroponic farming, this thing they're doing in water now. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, hydroponics. And, you know, hydroponics was around back in the Egyptians. I mean, they were doing hydroponics. The ancient Chinese were doing hydroponics. But it's taking water, and it's combining the fish, and then also taking plants and combining them the two together. So it's a symbiotic type relationship where the plants provide a certain benefit for the fish, and the fish, you know, their poop and whatnot provide certain nutrients for the plants. So it's a combined type of effort, and it can be scaled down to fit on your balcony. I have a lot of friends that have hydroponic operations in their backyards. You have big-scale hydroponics. In fact, if you think about, I can't think of the brother's name right now. He was pushing hydroponic operation. But it's the way to go. It's a way of you increase the yield. You increase the yield because you're feeding the plants directly. Now, some will say there's a lot of controversy with a lot of organic farmers. A lot of your farmers say, well, there's certain chemicals and inputs that are used that don't necessarily meet the criteria of organics. You know, so it's your call, it's your shot, but it's definitely a way to go. You know, when you start talking about being independent and being able to control your own food source, it's the way to go.
And one more thing, would you tell people stop wasting their urine?
Okay.
I mean, I came into that about 15 years ago. I'm not going to explain it. I'm going to let you explain because you're probably a little bit more expert than me, but I stopped wasting my urine about 15 years ago. So you could explain that to even for the grass. Could you just explain that to them?
Well, yeah, it's uracids. It has a nitrogen. The nitrogen can be used in the urine and whatnot. You have to make sure you dilute it right because it will burn, you know. But you're right; it can be used, and it goes along with what they call gray. It's gray irrigation systems where they're taking the water off the showers, water off the sinks, and that's considered a black It's black irrigation because anytime you're using like your poop or the urine, there's certain laws that regulate against that. But they do have compost toilets, and in certain rural settings, people are composting their urine and their feces, and running it through a process and breaking it down, and it's rich in nutrients. It's truly rich in nutrients. I know years ago I had a brother from Nigeria, and he used to use the urine to put on wounds and sores and whatnot. He said we use this and it cures. It has a curing effect for cuts and bruises and whatnot. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but it is valuable. It truly is valuable.
Yeah, you're getting right into it because, believe it or not, the things they're taking out of women now, they're taking that cord out of women now and trying to produce different organs and stuff. But you don't know your best antibiotic is your urine. That's why a long time ago, you probably remember this, my brother, when they used to wipe the baby's face with their own urine from the diaper.
Okay.
That's a home remedy, brother.
Yeah, but it had some properties in there, and if people start doing the research, they'll find out these are building cells for building blocks to building your skin. Because all our tissues and all our cells and stuff rebuild themselves. I forgot exactly what the time frame was, but they rebuild themselves. We think we got the same cells and the same everything. They just keep rebuilding itself, over and over within a short period of time.
All right, my brother. Hey, give me your name again. Give our listening audience your name again.
J Speed, just out here, just retired, 60 years old, still trying to, do my thing. That's all I'm trying to do. Eat right, feel right, and love right, and tell the truth about it.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you for calling in. Okay. I want to get back into the black farmer, and I want to get your thoughts on a booming crop that's expanding all over. What do you think about the black farmer getting involved with the marijuana boom?
Well, it definitely is a booming market. It was at about $9 billion right now, and they say it's going to increase. Industrial hemp was around back beginning of this country, before this country. And when you open it up and you start thinking in terms of the multiple uses, the fiber and paper and those types of things, what is it, the CB, what is it, CB, I'm having a mind blank on me, but yes. That I think is where the growth is going to really come from, because it has a healing properties to it. I was just at a natural products trade show here this last week, and every year I go to that trade show and there's always some kind of hot ingredients. A couple of years ago it was turmeric, and I think last year it may have been the sweet potato, but that was in everything. Far as the THC side of it, I choose, let everybody make their own choice on that one there. But I think the CBCs, and I don't know why I'm having a mind blank on it. CBD, yeah, that's where the future is going to be, because the pharmaceutical industry, they're jumping into it. I think, and that's ultimately who's going to regulate it and control it. And to answer your question, I think, black farmers, there's a place for those farmers that see that as a revenue stream. Because see, where I'm at is I'm in a biodiversity type mindset. So I don't believe in monocrops. I don't think any farmer should put all of their energy towards one type of crop. I think they should be looking at a multiple of crops. And so when you start looking at regenerative agriculture, which is something we were talking about earlier, and regenerative agriculture is the next step after organics. And it takes in consideration of building the soil, building the ecosystem, looking at it's a social component, fair wages and whatnot. I think that's kind of where we need to be looking at. So say if a farmer wants to set aside so much land for the production of industrial hemp, marijuana, so on, that's fine, because that's a revenue stream there. But I would also suggest that they would look at other types of crops as well, because that's the problem with the industrial farms now, because they're monocropped. It requires heavy use of pesticides. And whenever, it's not consistent with nature. You're working against nature.
Even the marijuana crop requires that too?
Well, yeah, I think any farming effort has to be it has to be a diverse farming effort where you're taking in different types of crops. So I would never suggest that one farmer just go strictly marijuana and that's all I'm going to grow.
Yeah.
I would say that perhaps that might be one of the crops that they would grow.
Let's go back a little and talk about what Booker T. Washington was talking about during his time period. He really emphasized getting involved with the land more so than politics.
Yeah.
What do you think about that now when you look back?
I think he was ahead of himself, and I think, a lot of people have opinions of Booker T. Washington, and if you can move beyond some of his politics and how you perceived him, he was pretty heavy dude because you got to figure it was 20 years after slavery. And he knew then the mentality of the people within America that we had to connect to the land. He knew that we had been working on the land and that we could easily build good lifestyles, being farmers, working with our hands. And when I look at today's time, I kind of see a parallel. When I look at the homeless issue that we have right now, when I go back and I look at poor farms, I don't know if you're familiar with the term poor farms. Years ago, there were poor farms all around. Poor houses. And these were places where people could come and they could work on a farm and they could eat and have a place to rest their head. The cities aren't working for our people right now. And it's almost we went back into a form of slavery. And so I think Booker T. Washington, the idea of industrial education, vocational education, because not everybody's going to be a doctor. Now, I know there will be those that say, well, man, we're moving into automation, robotics, artificial intelligence. Yeah, that has its place. Yeah. But I still think a good chunk of folks would do well if they could work with their hands, if they could have a small 2-3 acre farm, be able to produce. And, he had seamstress. He took the whole vocational thing and made it where people could have dignity, because there's dignity in work. Yeah.
And the parallel that I see is most of the people that were so against Booker T. Washington come out of the educated elite.
Yeah.
Doing the so-called talented tent, if you will. And when I look at this whole Adolf situation, since we're talking about food, we know Africa is that's the basket, that's the bread basket for just about everything. And one of the things that I've noticed is I've seen the split that's coming between the descendants of slaves in America over here and the African immigrants. And now the more I think about it, a lot of the African immigrants, the thing that they have in common is most of them come out of the educated elite over here. And it seemed to me that the whole discussion, the whole conflict, is at that educated elite over there and the educated elite over here. And the masses down here is lost out of the discussion. The ones who's really, really in charge of what's happening over there in Africa in terms of the land, and the average, the other 90% of the African Americans that we have over here. How can we get them involved in the discussion? Because Carter G. Woodson pointed out very clearly about how the educated elite on both sides of the world were really off base with the direction that they was heading in. And I think from the 60s on, they took us in a direction that we still haven't recovered from. Right. And these are the same type of people that's up here discussing on both sides. Adolf over here, so-called educated elite, and the masses is having nothing to do with the discussion, especially because the masses is usually the land people, the people that's close to the land. And that's what we're trying to develop now. What are some of your thoughts on this whole Adolf situation as far as food sovereignty is concerned?
Well, I've been monitoring the U2 and looking at the different shows, and so I get the ideal of bringing a common voice. I have my challenges against us being just strictly in one political party, and I see the need to organize in such a way where we can pressure and make sure that we're not taking for granted that people just assume, well, they're going to give us a vote, and all I got to do is come and make some empty promises. I get that. And, Brother Antonio Moore and Yvette, what's Yvette's last
Cornell.
name? Yeah, Cornell. They laid down some pretty good principles. But what I don't like is the notion that you say, well, Pan-Africanism is dead. No, it's not. I got a project right now in Zambia, Africa. We got 90 acres in Zambia, Africa, outside of Lusaka. A partner of mine he's building a school, agricultural school. And you're right, it's a village. And the folks over there, they worrying about the alligators and the hippos eating up their rice. I mean, they ain't having no hatred towards us. And me and the brother, I have a project that I told you about down in Mississippi that I'm in the process of setting up. And I just look at Africa. I mean, Africa is the breadbasket. The Chinese and everybody around the world is running to Africa. Africa provides 40% of the food to Europe, okay? The average age of Africans, Africa has the youngest population of any other continent in the world. So if we can position ourselves with a lot of the Africans around an agricultural theme, around a food sovereignty theme, when you go back to that black farmer who is not really making 10,000, can you imagine if we could set up supply chains between the African continent and throughout the whole African diaspora? I just don't think it's time to start breaking, severing relationships over. I mean, okay, if the reparations come, that's fine. Yeah. But I think the future for the black man and woman has to be on connecting through the diaspora. And I think agriculture has to be the generator. Mm-hmm. I mean, Africa is set to do $1 trillion in agriculture within the next 10 to 12 years. Mm-hmm. So how can we let the Chinese and let everybody else capitalize on that? That's ours right there.
Without a doubt. And, one of my mentors when I was back in school in Michigan was his brother named Harold Cruz. Mm-hmm. He wrote 2 great books, Crisis of the Negro Intellectual. But his lesser-known book, which I think is a very important book, is called Plural But Equal. Mm. And in that book, he's talking about how the time period that we live in, stuff like what they call, from an economic point of view, communism and capitalism would be a fallacy. He said that we will live in what we call a dual ethnic economic communities. Mm. And I really see that in Los Angeles, where most of the ethnic groups that you got out here exist in 2 communities. Mm-hmm. They exist in their own community in which they control the whole livelihood of everything that happens in that community. Mm-hmm. And they exist also in what you call the shopping mall community, where they mix with all the other ethnic groups. Right. But our people, and I think this is because of what we talked about, what Carter G. Woodson pointed out with the miseducation of the Negro, the whole educated elite. Mm-hmm. And they only exist in that shopping mall community. It's okay to control that. But at the same time, our community, especially out here, is the only community in which we don't control the economic life of it. That's true. Now, my thoughts is I see, even from a historical point of view, I never could understand, coming from the Mississippi Delta now as I get older, and I can't understand where any descendants of slave America want to be involved with the Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. I don't think the Democratic Party can overcome its history. Mm-hmm. The history of the Confederacy, what they did. They caused most of the problem for the descendants of slaves America. Mm-hmm. And since we're talking about the black farmer, you very seldom hear the discussion about what happened with the 27 flood in the Mississippi Delta and Louisiana that covered that area for 4 months, in which they actually re-enslaved the descendants of slaves in America in my hometown of Greenville, Mississippi. And this is one of the reasons that blacks ended up heading in the direction of the Democratic Party. Because you had Hoover, right? He was Secretary of Commerce at the time. And when he found out that they had re-enslaved blacks when the levee broke down there, he took the successor of Booker T. Washington was named Morton. He succeeded Booker T. Washington. Morton Field, Tuskegee Avenue, all that is named after him. They did a report. He came down there. And when he found out it was true, when they got the report, he got Morton to suppress the report with a promise. Because remember, he was a Republican. And he promised Morton that he would divide up all of that bankrupt land down there in the Mississippi, Louisiana Delta among the black farmers if they suppressed that report. So Morton went along with him. He became president in 1928, went back on his word, started back dealing with the Democratic Dixiecrats that was down there then. And so when the election came in 1932, the top Republicans like Morton and all of them, they made them pay for it, and they slid over and supported Franklin D. Roosevelt. Okay. And we know what happened. New Deal came along and all that kind of stuff. But nobody can explain to me why any descendants of slaves in America would be in this Democratic Party. I can't understand it. To me, we got to either be independent or try to take back this Republican Party. The Democrats, to me, is not the option. And I watch all these people getting ready to run for president now, and what's happening is they getting ready to take us back in the same old silly cycle. Number one, how can we explain what they did to our ancestors through slavery, through down in after Reconstruction, you know, the black codes and all. It was the Democratic Party that did that. See? So, to me, I don't want to hear no excuses about the Democratic Party has no place in it for the descendants of slaves in America. We better wake up to that. We either got to go in as independents or we got to take back the Republican Party. But the Democratic Party, that's not the option of all to me. And that's tied into what's happening with the black farmers now. Because it's just recently with this Democratic Party, you go back to Fannie Lou Hamer and what happened all right from a historical point of view. See? And we're not talking about hundreds of years ago. We're talking about during the 60s. See? So we need to, that's why I say when I look at this whole Adolf thing, see, we need the people that's driving this Adolf, right? I'm suspicious because they part of the educated elite, and Carter G. Woodson told us what's happening with that. See, we got to develop something from the grassroots to make this thing work. See, now they can be involved, but they can no longer miseducate the community like they do out here. We see a situation where most of the blacks that used to be in Watts, historical black community, and now they down in Skid Row, you know. So out here in Los Angeles, the black community in Los Angeles deserves no respect. You know, I don't care what kind of basketball team, entertainer you have out here, but Skid Row, to allow that situation to happen, the black community deserves no respect until they deal with, that's the top issue. Everything become a fact. The religions become false. It's like when Frederick Douglass, when he was talking about that 5th of July speech, and he was telling the United States, your religion, that's a sham with all this slavery jumping off. So I'm telling these black churches around here right now, as long as Skid Row exists, your religion is a sham. I'm speaking of Islam, Judaism, Christianity, the whole thing. Los Angeles. As long as you let Skid Row exist, your religion is a sham. If you're a Muslim, Christian, or Jew, whatever. So I had to get that out with them.
I respect
that. Can you talk a little about the food system, the seed to the table aspect, and some of the missing things, and how can we fill in the gap?
Well, as I was listening to you, my thoughts start, because I've reached out to a lot of the faith-based institutions. And, when you go back, and you're right, there was a time when the faith-based institutions, they were on the cutting edge, and they harnessed the agricultural energy, and they used it in such a way to create hospitals, to create schools.
Yep.
Okay, so, there's always been that relationship between faith-based institutions. You look at the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and what he was doing with the Shabazz, with the pies, and the various things like that. You look at Ted Watkins, who was a pioneer within urban agriculture. He had stores, he had the various gardens underneath, the farm market gardens under the power lines.
He was out here in Los Angeles.
He was in L.A. Mm-hmm. He was like late 50s, 60s, and whatnot. That's why it's funny to me when I hear a lot of people talking about, well, this is new. I said, no, it's just new to you. But I look at Ted Watkins, he was a pioneer. When I look at Booker T. Watley, and Booker T. Watley was a pioneer within agriculture, then you start seeing that something is wrong with leadership here. When you've got 900, say, just for example, and I'm not jumping on to Christianity, but you got 900 churches, and most of them have kitchens. And you figure how many of those kitchens are being used. And you go back to the Skid Row piece, and you start looking at these farmers. And you just look at the waste. When you go back and look at food waste, we're talking about, 10 billion tons? What do they say? Close to $165 billion per year is wasted. I was doing some work with some of the students over at El Camino College, and we were going out gleaning. And we were able to get, fruit that was bruised slightly. Yeah. And we took it to some of the churches. We canned it. We freeze-dried it. I just think, when you got students that are in nutrition majors at some of these local community colleges, Cal Poly's got a great nutrition, food science type effort. It just seems like people aren't pulling all the cogs together in such a way. It makes no sense that these churches aren't stepping up and using the churches and the mosque. And I'm open up to the mosque as well, because I've talked to Minister Tony, and we've talked over the years. We've got to take these faith-based institutions and position them in such a way where the farmers can use them to bring their produce, like the brother was saying earlier, setting up farmers markets. It shouldn't be a week that doesn't go by that there's not a farmers market. If we have to end up reaching out and creating our own brands. And when we start talking about elites, I looked at a statistic that I always think about. Black folks drive more Mercedes than white folks do. I mean, you think about that. Yeah. Do we just got to keep buying stuff? At some point, ownership of industry is the way to alleviate poverty. Mm-hmm. Why is it that everybody else can come in this country, Koreans and all these other folks, and they concentrate on the industry? Yeah. And they master that industry. When I think in terms of food sovereignty, I mean, we eating. We're eating 2-3 meals a day. Yep. It's obvious. So that makes a lot of sense that food should be high on our priority list. Yep. And when you start talking about homelessness, it's a 1-2 punch that we can get our people back working. Yeah. Let's buying Mercedes and let's pool our money and start creating our own brands. Yep. Let's work with these farmers and start creating processing facilities, and then using the churches as distribution, spinning off and creating stores. So from the seed to the dollar bill.
And especially when you look at the whole history of Islam that was during the time of Prophet Muhammad, they were really tied into the homeless because a lot of his followers and stuff had become homeless when they got drove out of Mecca. But a major story with these Christians, and I'm going to say this because I come out of the Christian faith, Baptist. My father was a Baptist minister. Got 2 brothers as Baptist ministers right now down south. But when you start talking, the reason that we call the Qumran report is because Qumran was a home of the Messiah Jesus. This is where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yes. This is where they got the documents from, not the translations that people running around here with. And then even when you look at the documents that they have, they really stress in the book of Acts about the communal aspect of food and during that particular time. The Christians wasn't deeply involved in this greedy capitalistic type system that developed over a period of time. I think we need to put some pressure on these religious institutions, because within the orbit of all these religious institutions, starting point is helping the poor.
Yes.
The ones coming up out of prison. That Messiah Jesus announced this messiahship, talking about helping people coming out of prisons. So where's the help now? You know, I think L.A. will really need a renaissance here.
Yes.
People need to wake up. They need to look closely at their leadership, not only their political leadership, but their religious leadership. I'm speaking of the descendants of slaves of America now that's out here. The other ethnic group, they taking care of business. You know, the Koreans, they built up their economic empire out here.
Yeah.
But see, the descendants of slaves of America, we've been out here longer. We've been out here since Billy Mason.
Yeah.
During that time.
Right.
You know, the Koreans didn't have an economic hold. So what happened?
What happened?
See, and like you say, food is such an important aspect of that. Can you talk a little about the farmers market thing, the importance of a farmers market? How can we make that more part of the community?
Well, the farmers market is one of the many delivery systems, and I think we need to reach out. You know, we do have farmers and scattered around California, and we do have the urban ag piece where we do have what they call market gardeners, and so we need to bring them, you know, and showcase them and give them that direct dollar, because sometimes the agricultural distribution system, we can't, you know, it's very political, and sometimes a lot of our folks get cut out of that. So the farmers markets gives us that direct access to the consumer. But one thing I've noticed with farmers markets, you have to be careful, because some of these farmers and some of these general farmers markets, they're going downtown and buying stuff, you know what I mean? And they're bringing it and they're putting their little label on it. And so we have to be careful to make sure that if we're talking about building black farmers, if we're talking about setting things in motion where we can start putting our dollars directly behind black farmers, then we have to make sure that we support these markets, and we have to make sure that when we set the markets up that the prices are fair, that we're not gouging the consumer, because that's a lot of times people will say, well, it just costs too much. But I do understand the dynamic there, because a lot of times these folks have to travel from rural areas and whatnot. But the farmers markets are a good delivery system. CSAs, community supported agriculture, whereas you find a farmer that's out there and you partner up with them and you say, look, I'm going to pay you XYZ dollars in advance, and then every week or every other week there's a box delivered, or there's a central location where the person picks that up. Then I think another delivery system would be food co-ops. We really need to look at creating food co-ops. I think that's a way to go, because then people can work. They can be part of a team. You can take that same food that's in Whole Foods, Bristol Farms, Gelston's. It doesn't have to be that high. And we can bring it through a co-op and bring the prices down. So now we're bringing good, healthy foods into our community at a reasonable price. So those are three delivery systems. But I do think the farmers market out of those three would probably be the easiest one. So we need to expand upon our farmers markets, and we need to support our farmers markets.
And the churches could have a hand in that too.
They could have a hand in that too. But I would also, and I know our time is running, I want to also look at our independent restaurants. We got a lot of independent restaurants out there. So at some point, what we have to do is look at co-oping in such a way to say joint purchasing. So you say, well, look, I can't afford to buy that kind of meat because it costs too much. But if 50 independent restaurants come together and they purchase under like a certain number or a certain purchasing number, you drive that price down. And then in some cases, we have to educate our people that it's not always best to go to that 99-cent store over there and get your stuff. Now, if you can pay $50 for that hairstyle and you can pay $25 for those fingernails, you should be able to put a few more dollars towards putting something inside of you. Because either you're going to pay now or you're going to pay later. You're going to pay later when you're at the doctor's office and you got a cupboard full of medicine. So you need to make sure that you invest in what's going inside your temple.
Okay. I want to take a little quick break now. I want to play. We got this play coming up this weekend, and it's about another important brother here in Los Angeles, and I don't want to see his brother get lost. His brother's name was Lynn Manning. He wrote 19 plays about Los Angeles. He died in 2015. So I got this play about him called Voice for the Village. But first, I want to play this video of Lynn doing some of his work.
Time trumps wide-eyed and slack jaw towards electric midnight. Having peeped the fraud of New Age mysticism, I have come full circle and dance among purple pyramids to the chamber music of suburban bathroom chemists. I am parasailing the synapses on an electrochemical cruise through tall cotton. I am out there, and the phone rings. Its cord a pulsing axon to the real world. Its receiver a volatile neurotransmitter, a plastic explosive awaiting my touch. Gingerly, I remove it from its cradle. The earpiece shatters, flooding my apartment with the sounds and scents of my mother's drunken poverty. Her terror looms huge and horrible just beyond the grasp of my rational mind. I have to reel in the ectoplasmic filaments extending from my fingertips. Command Miles Davis and Herbie Hancock to cease stirring their foul-smelling bitches brew and allow this 6-foot-thick carpet time to retract to its original height. I say, okay, Mom, but turn the music down. What was that you said? You shot the motherfucker. What motherfucker? My apartment expands and contracts with the controlled heaving of my chest. Its walls become my exoskeleton, providing me the volume to contain the images flooding from this shattered earpiece. Somewhere in South Central Los Angeles, just a loogie's phlegmatic flight from Skid Row, my mother stands, a smoking gun in one hand and my throbbing ear in the other. Her old man lies tossed and twisted on their filthy floor, dying from bullet wounds and being far too loud about it. He's oozing rare, ancient alcohol-saturated indigenous American blood into their worm-rotted floorboards, and I think, can't the septuagenarian bastard quit bitching long enough to die quietly? Hell, I didn't make all that noise when I got shot. When I lay oozing, precious African-American, Irish, Mexican hemoglobin into the beer-stained carpet of that Vine Street bar, my sight sucked down the black hole of a .32 automatic. Mom says, shut the fuck up, I'm trying to get your ass some help. I say, did you call the ambulance, Mom? Did you call the police? She says, I tried to, but I couldn't get through. Everything's busy. That's why I called you. Maybe you can get through up there in Hollywood. Get them to send somebody down here before this old bastard dies on me. The colors in my apartment shift towards red, hot awareness of LA's socioeconomic inequities. Those who most need help can't get it when they want it. Yes. South Central Saturday night shootout is well underway. Many more will be dying from newly torn buttonholes before the dawn shines its spotlight on the carnage. I light a cigarette and inhale the entire contents of my room. Sweat pours from my pores as rationality takes residence. I say, okay, Moms, I'll call emergency as soon as I get off the phone. Just leave the gun out in the open and stay away from it. If nobody shows up in 10 minutes, you give me a call back. If they do show up, give me a call from the jailhouse. It's when you can. The Hollywood emergency operator asks questions to test my tenuous cool. Questions like, who are you and what's your involvement? And why didn't she call from down there? And why didn't she call herself? Through rapidly growing teeth and hair, I hip him to the ramifications of tax-based police protection, checkbook emergency service, bid him long life in Primrose Lane, and hang up. The rescue now in motion. I return to slow motion. I remove slits stalactite from my cavernous fridge. Start that bitch's brew to boiling once again. Climb back up into the bell of Miles's horn and have myself blown away.
Lynn Manning, very important playwright, writer, but that brother was a poet. His brother was blinded at the age of 23 in Hollywood and remade itself into a great artist. This is what the play is about, Voice from the Village. This coming Saturday, this coming Friday, March the 22nd, 23rd, 24th, at the Complex, Friday and Saturday at 8, Sunday at 2 and 6. Come check us out. 6476 Santa Monica Boulevard, Hollywood, California, 90038. You can get your tickets at brownpapertickets.com. Just put in Voice from the Village. Okay, let's go for some closing comments. Okay. We still got a few minutes with Brother Fagan. Closing comments?
Yeah, I do. I'm just thinking here. You know, we a couple of months ago we had the government closed down, less than 6 weeks ago, and that really kind of showed the nakedness of our economy in the sense that, you know, people were worrying about losing their food stamps, people weren't getting paid, and they were doing GoFundMe. You know, it's not if we're going to have an earthquake, it's when we're going to have the earthquake. They talk about EMPs, electrical magnetic pulse. They talk about pandemics, a whole host of things that are coming down the pipeline. This economy is not that strong. So when we start talking about black food sovereignty, it's not a luxury. Like the brother was saying earlier, if you get just a container and put it on your porch and be growing something, everybody needs to be looking in terms of how do we get some kind of food going. If your family got land somewhere, perhaps it's time to reach out to the local college in that area and let them know that, hey, I'd like to lease my land out where you can use it. We don't have the leisure to sit back as a people and just assume that everybody's going to feed us. And it may be time for some of us to look at creating homesteads, getting out of the city, getting a couple acres of land and creating a homestead. Black townships. We talked about the black townships last time.
Yeah. Mount Bayou, Mississippi.
Yes.
Boley, Oklahoma.
Yes.
Allensworth right out here that they should try to revive again.
Yes.
All that kind of history going way back.
It's a scary thought that right now we can't feed ourselves and that we're putting ourselves in a very vulnerable place right now. So food sovereignty. We got a saying in Timbuktu Resource Center, no food, no culture, no culture without agriculture. No culture without agriculture. And that means a lot in the sense that we, like you were saying, it's time for us to look at a grassroots movement that's focused around controlling the food. In agriculture, you talk about food, fiber, and fuel. Those are the 3 F's. And that, like I say, there are job opportunities, the quality of life. Let's not allow our food to be weaponized against us. And right now, our food is basically, it's devastating us. Okay. So it's time to create a movement. Thank you, brother.
Yeah. And for your contact information for those that want to get involved with you and work with you on some of these projects.
You can reach me at TimbuktuResourceCenter.org. You can reach me at fishfagan7@yahoo.com. fishfagan7@yahoo.com. You can call me 310-920-8047. Thank you so much, brother.
Okay. A special thanks to my in-studio guest, Reginald Fagan. Please listen to past shows of the Qumran Report by Googling in Qumran Report. Thank you for tuning in to the Qumran Report, and from your host, Melvin Ishmael Johnson, may the peace and blessings of the life-giving creative spirit be upon you and upon your family. I leave you with a song that opened the show, Bobby Sang by Ron Allen.
But the voice is really greater in the mix of time and the chicken body flavor. A poem could be safer, but the voice is really greater in the mix of time and the chicken